All right, I hit record, and I'm with Phil Yates. Phil, talk to us a little bit about where you are in your author journey.
Okay, I've been a games designer for 25, or professional games designer for 25 years, give or take.
How did I
Uh,
miss that? I didn't know that.
that was in the bio.
I totally missed it.
I
That's
didn't think
wild.
I mentioned 25 years, but
Yeah, I
not.
saw the military history stuff, but I didn't see the game. How did I miss game designer? Sorry, now I'm confused. But yeah, that's awesome.
Yep.
Yeah.
So the key thing there, though, is that it's tabletop games, not computer games.
Okay.
So for the first 20 years of that, I mean, this is my professional career. I've been, gaming since I was first discovered it with my mum's help when I was 11.
Nice.
Um, was it 11? Something like that. Anyway, it's the year Star Wars came out.
Okay.
Um, so that shows my age.
That's awesome.
um, and so, yeah, I'm the writer of the rules and wrote an awful lot of the books giving different forces to use in the game and so forth. And so, written about 80 odd books in that area.
Dang.
So, writing isn't new to me,
Yeah.
nor is being edited and all of that sort of thing.
Mhm.
But then, about 10 years ago, one of the guys working with me as another games designer said, "Hey, NaNoWriMo, you should join me. Let's write novels." So I was like, okay. Well, actually, I've just been reading about the New Zealand division in their first battles in Greece in 1941, April 41, so about 6 months before America joined the Second World War.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, that's interesting. It'd be really cool. Nobody knows anything about it. I'm a military historian and I'm only just finding out about it, sort of thing. But then I discovered that I wasn't really sort of in the right place to do it. I had other projects on and sort of I
Mm.
didn't do it.
Yeah.
Then come 2020 and COVID, a very common story, it seems. It was like, right, time to do this.
Yeah.
And I started writing. And yeah, my first problem was writing long enough. The stuff I'd
Mm.
written, any fiction I'd written, had been really, really short, like a few hundred words, 200 to 500 words,
Okay.
um, just a half page or one page in the book,
Yeah. Yeah.
sort of just as a bit of flavor stuff. So I was really used to and editing people's contributions down to that. So
Mm.
really used to getting very tight on that sort of thing. And yeah, my first attempt at the opening scene came out at 600 words, and it was like, I think this is a bit short.
Yeah. Yeah.
I managed to get it up to just over 1,000 on the secondary, right?
Hey, that's better. We're moving.
Yeah. So now it's about two and a bit thousand for that
Okay.
scene. Um, and yeah, I wrote through, got to the middle of the book, and Save the Cat was one of the great things I discovered at the beginning. So got to the middle of the
Yeah.
book, and like I don't know how to write the middle of the book. And
Okay.
after mucking around that for a few weeks, it was like, no, time to stop. Just skipped over the middle of the book. I knew what had to happen. I
Yeah.
knew I'm a plotter sort of guy, so I knew where I was going. I just didn't know how this bit worked. So it's like, fine. And then after that, something, we start again, and I continued writing. And then I got to the end part of the book. And again, it was like, I don't know how to do this. Okay, I'm going to declare that draft done.
Okay.
I'm then going to go back to the beginning and take what I've learned over the last however long that was
Yeah.
and have another go. Um, and my sister then declared that she wanted to be an editor and said, I'll read your book, and gave me some really good feedback. So I was
That's
halfway
great.
through the second draft at that point. So I went back and started the third draft because her feedback started from the beginning.
Hmm.
And about 6 months ago, I finished the complete draft. And then lots of
Congratulations. That's exciting.
yeah, personal life got in the way and other
Hmm.
projects. And yeah, over the last few months, getting back to it and working on a character Bible because I know that some of the characters, the minor characters, have potentially crossed over.
Hmm.
As we'll discuss, the book is following the sort of sharp model of a a character who bounces around, accidentally being in all the important places to meet all the
Nice.
important people and be at all the important events.
Hmm.
And so he's got a cast of minor characters that are his men.
Hmm.
And there's 9 of them because that's the historical size of the unit, which is
Yeah.
far too many for them all to have particularly big roles.
Yeah.
But
It's a lot.
yeah, they're a chorus essentially, but
Mm.
with individual personalities in that. But I'm pretty sure over the time, some of the guys at the beginning of the book have swapped names with some of the guys at the end of the book.
That's
Completely
tough.
swapped
Yeah.
personalities.
Look, 9 is a lot to balance. That's a lot of
Yeah,
characters to hold together.
yeah. And so I'm working through making sure of that. And then just to make things more complicated, it's a multi POV book as well. I see it more in the style of epic fantasy rather than historical fiction,
Sure.
on the grounds that nobody really, very few of the audience are going to have any idea what I'm talking about. So as far as it goes, even though it's a lot of history in it,
Mhm.
people I need to treat it as a made up world and keep people sort of along with me rather than assuming too much, which has proved to be my biggest challenge.
Yeah, I think that's a great strategy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And because there's a lot going on historically at the time, I thought it would be good to have, rather than trying to do the exposition through exposition, have characters, interweaving, bringing in events that aren't where the main POV character is, and then having them cross over and so forth.
Gotcha.
And so one of the first characters you meet is a Yugoslav anti-aircraft gunner by the name of
Okay.
Ivan Kovac, John Smith. I chose the name deliberately.
Nice.
um, and so he brings in some background from the Yugoslav side as the Germans came into Greece from the north through Yugoslavia. It took them a
Mm.
whole 3 days to cross Yugoslavia and reach the Greek border. It was,
Wow.
I think, Blitzkrieg. So he has an encounter with Gerhardt, who is in this piece we're talking about.
Okay.
And that's sort of Gerhardt's introduction as well. And then Ivan makes his way south. The big bad, who's a Brandenburg commando, takes a bridge by using camouflage uniforms. So he's wearing Yugoslav uniforms, kicks the British off a bridge they're trying to demolish. And there happens to be an anti-aircraft gun being towed by a big half-track just ahead of him in the queue as he comes up to the bridge.
Gotcha.
Then Ivan arrives at Mount Olympus, and a Yugoslav anti-aircraft gun turned up in the New Zealand division, along with 4 random Greek anti-aircraft guns. They were the only anti-aircraft guns the New Zealand division had.
Wow.
The Yugoslav gun fired for a couple of days, ran out of ammunition, and departed. Nobody spoke Yugoslav. The Yugoslavs didn't speak English.
Okay.
Nobody really had any idea what was going on. But
Yeah.
it's Ivan Kovac.
Okay.
He goes south to Athens looking for the Yugoslav army because surely, there must be trying to reform the army somewhere. And then the evacuation happens, and there's a nurse who the main character Tom meets at the beginning. And during the evacuation, the one Australian ambulance carrying New Zealand nurses fell off a mountain. And guess what the first vehicle to turn up to help them was? A Yugoslav half-track.
Nice.
So that's Ivan Kovac. And so that's just one example, but it's typical of what's going on throughout the story, based on actual historical stuff. Now, whether those half-tracks are the same half-track in reality, but they're the same half-track throughout. And likewise, Gerhardt, who's in this thing, if he was a historical person, he manages to fight in at least 3 divisions.
Wow.
He's just a generic
just filling in for a generic.
He hands a division that stands in for what's going on at the time.
Yeah.
So so there's a bunch of characters. So I like making things difficult, as you can tell. a bunch of characters interweaving, which is
Okay.
relevant to this piece.
Um, okay. So how can the story sounds fascinating, and I love what you're doing with the interweaving POV. I think it's super common for fantasy and for this kind of like historical fiction that you're telling, where you're like running
Hmm.
them together. It really helps to get all of the events in perspective in a way that's not unrealistic for one character to go through all of that, right? Like, so
Hmm.
if you're going to cover that many events, you almost have to have a multiple POV storyline going without like passing the POV from one to the next.
Yeah.
Um, so we can get into the text and like the notes that you sent me, and we can look at that. We can talk about multiple POVs. Um, or we can look at something else more pressing if you want. Where do you want to start today?
Um, the piece that I sent you was one of the combat scenes in what um, Save the Cat calls the storming of the castle. So
Yeah,
it's the Dark Night of the Soul. It sort of looks like the ending of the story, but of course it's not.
yeah, yeah.
You know, and so it's a combat scene which I found actually surprisingly difficult to write combat scenes because
They're really hard.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's like dialogue, but
Hmm.
it's action dialogue rather than spoken dialogue. But you've got to have spoken dialogue on there. But having people just yakking away in the middle of a combat scene doesn't work. And trying to
Feels
keep
weird.
everybody sort of keep the reader up with the action
Yeah.
without slowing it down with too much exposition is something I struggled with. So that's why I sent you this piece. And
Okay.
so I'd love to go through what you've said about it.
Okay. Great.
Just to set the scene a little on your first note.
Yeah, please do.
Um,
It's always hard coming in because I'm like, I don't know what you've already told the reader. So
yeah.
coming in, I'm like, yeah, I'm always cautious with my first note. I'm like, I don't know what's happening. And then 9 times out of 10, it's like, that's because I sent you the middle of chapter 4. So yeah. So
Yeah.
catch us
This
up to where we are.
yeah, this piece is has basically two preceding parts
Okay.
of it, in which the this piece has got a scene from a piece from the viewpoint of Tom, the New Zealand soldier, and
Okay.
then a piece from the viewpoint of Gerhard, the German soldier. There's already been a pair of those beforehand,
Okay.
so we're jumping in media res at the start of this.
Gotcha. Okay.
Um, that yeah, the fighting started, and Tom is halfway into Kalamata to try and knock out a big German gun.
Gotcha.
And yep, we're now jumping back from Gerhardt's viewpoint back to Tom's viewpoint,
Gotcha. Okay.
which might
Um,
explain the strange opening.
it does. No, I think the opening's great, actually. I like how it opens. You've got this opening sentence. Kiwi, Tom shouted as he burst through the door, rifle at the ready. Aussie, Tom found himself staring down the barrel of a rifle, wide-eyed, khaki-clad soldiers behind it. Tom lowered his rifle, exhaling. That's a fantastic opening to a POV. Really great. Catches my attention. And you're opening with Gerhard later. Like you sent me another like we switch POV in the middle of this. Let me get down to where he is. This is also a fantastic change in POV. The bolt clicked back, another length of empty belt on the pile, out of ammo. Gerhard spent the shells and empty belts on the balcony off the back of his arm. So let's talk about these openings and what you're doing really well that I don't want you to lose.
Yep.
You're coming in middle of action, right? In both POVs, you're switching into the middle of the action. Tom is bursting through a door, rifle at the ready. Gerhard is firing off a clip. That is great. What's really going to slow down your story in this changing of POV is if every time you change POV, you give me like a summary of where they are. That's going to make this feel draggy. And so coming in right in the middle of the scene, beautiful, like really well done. The other thing you're doing really well is right away with both Tom and with Gerhard, you're giving me an opening sentence that tells me exactly whose POV I'm in. Right? Like I don't actually need this here, this opening piece because you tell me Gerhard swept the spent shells across the enemy balcony. So after you've introduced him once earlier in the book, you can come back to his POV. You do need to have a break between the two.
Yeah.
It might be a chapter break. You might put his name at the top of the chapter, something like that. But you're doing at the beginning of the paragraph exactly what I need, which is telling me exactly whose perspective I'm in. Does that make
The
sense?
reason for the little 4-line thing is just that early readers were like, okay, hang on, where are we now? Because, of course, it's moving in space and time.
Yeah,
This
and if you're moving in
quite,
space and time, you've got to tell us. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was just like, okay, every time I'll tell you, remind you who this person is, where they are, and what day it is.
Yeah, and that's great.
Just in case. And I figured, it may be overkill, but at least it means that if anybody's coming back in, next night and going, okay, yeah, oh, yep, that's him. Yep, Kalamata. Where the hell is that? But I've got a map further back. I'll look at that. Monday. Oh, okay, yep. So Sunday last I saw it, so we're next day. Let's go.
Yeah. Now, I think this is smart. It's going to feel a little like weighty, but I think what you're doing is really good. With the reader writing historical fiction or fantasy or sci-fi or anything that takes place in a world foreign to our own, you kind of have to pick your pain, right? Like the reader is going to experience some pain. And a lot of times the reader loves the pain, so it's fine. Like they love the spaceship journey, right? Like in the sci-fi, but you're picking your pain for the reader, right? In this, you really want the pain being like, can I help the reader understand what it's like for these people in this battle area that the reader has never been in, that the reader doesn't understand? That's a big enough burden on the reader, right? Like that's a big enough jump. What you don't want the reader being like is, wait, where am I and what time is it? And like that's pain that's unnecessary. So I love that you're eliminating that pain. I really liked what you did with these opening paragraphs. I don't want you to lose, even though you're eliminating this pain from the reader, I don't want you to lose really pop openings like this. These are great. Like you did really well. There is something though I notice once we get into the scene that happens a couple times that I think you can solve with just a couple sentences that's really going to help. So your next paragraph is, Tom found himself staring down the barrel of a rifle, a wide-eyed, khaki-clad soldier behind it. Tom lowered his rifle, exhaling. The Germans have the beach road thoroughly covered. Any chance of getting round this way? A Bren gunner fired a burst from the window, then ducked back. Tom eyed the door leading onto the street. Now, when we come into a new space, whether that's a time jump or a place jump, or here just indicating he's bursting through a door. So we're moving into a new room. There's 4 things the reader needs to kind of ground them in the setting. Who is in this room? Right? How many people are there? Who are they? And if they're faceless people, then just leave them faceless, right? Like you can be like 10 Aussie soldiers ducked behind the window, right? Like there's like, I don't need you to be like 10 Aussie soldiers, one with a brown hat, one with a green hat, one with a red hat, one with a blue, right? Like we just keep it vague. I just need to know who's present.
Yep.
And I need to know, like, for Tom, what's important about the room. For the prospective character, what's important about the room. And so what that does is, if you imagine this scene as like a play taking place on the stage of the reader's imagination, that allows the reader to like be a part of the moment, right? Like, so telling me who's there, how many people do I see on the stage? What are the props that are important that I actually need to pay attention to? That helps ground that reader. So this is a really interesting moment with this Aussie soldier. You don't actually ever tell me where they are or like what the room's like, what Tom is seeing. I never see it. And I don't know how many people are there or is it just the 2? Is it the gunner at the window and the khaki clad soldier that's pointing a rifle at Tom? Is this room full? Like, it helps me understand what's happening if you can
Right.
pull me into that moment. There's two more. There's the emotional tone, which means how does Tom feel in this
Yep.
moment? You do a really great job of that. So you don't need to, your vocalizations are great, right? You're giving me Kiwi with an exclamation point. Tom shouted, burst through the door, rifle at the ready. I know exactly how he feels at this moment through his vocalization and his body language. That's fantastic. Now, if you don't provide for me the emotional tone, and this is important for earlier, as the reader, I'm just going to carry over whatever was last. Now, where that gets tricky is with you jumping places in time, the reader will carry the emotional tone from the last place in time, even if you jump space and time, because the reader is on this emotional journey with your vehicle characters. It takes a really like complex and unique reader to be able to go, okay, 4 chapters ago or 4 scenes ago, Gerhard felt scared. I'm now back with Gerhard. He's scared. They're just going
Yep.
to be like, oh, Tom's in action mode. Gerhard's in action mode.
Yep.
So your flip here works great because Tom and Gerhard are both in action mode, right? Like they're both in the middle of this firefight. So we get that they're like both the same. Now, as we get into Gerhard a little bit, he's less rushed and frantic than Tom. He's much more controlled, which is fantastic. But they're like, you're doing a good job with like the transfer here. The reason I'm bringing this up though is there are moments where like you'll have Tom really sad and then you'll move to another character who's not sad and you'll
Yep.
need to establish that emotional tone or we'll carry the sad into it. Does that make sense?
Yep. Excellent. Yep.
Yeah, that fourth thing is the conflict. What are they after? And like what is the problem that needs to be solved in this scene? And again, if you don't specify it, it'll carry over from the scene before. The reader will just be like, "Oh, we're still solving the last problem." So if you have a new problem that needs to be solved, make sure that happens in the first couple paragraphs. I'd try to get you want all four of these things: who, where, emotional tone, and problem. You want all four of those things happening in the first kind of 3 paragraphs. If you go much longer than that, the reader starts to feel ungrounded. Does that make
Yep.
sense? So here it would be nice to get like a sentence about the room and who's there, right? And you don't need more than really a sentence, right? Like, so Tom loaded the rifle, exhaling. There were 2 men by the windows, both with machine guns pointed out, and the third standing in front of him. It looked like they had been here a long time. That's all I need, right? Like, and now I'm like, okay, I mean, that's all that's important to Tom. Like, I don't know if that's true, but just hypothetically, but that's all that's important to Tom.
Close.
Yeah, that's all I really need is like, hey, this is what Tom sees.
Yep.
You might know, like, there didn't seem to be a commanding officer among them, right? Like that would be something that Tom would note. That would be like, oh, or like the commanding officer was over in the corner, right? Like crying
Yeah.
his eyes out, right? Like that's all stuff that like Tom would see. Um,
Yeah. Oh, I suppose the senior officers a few lines down was sort of implying that none of them have any idea where any of the officers are.
yeah, and it's great. Like senior officers, no bloody clue, mate. You may want to cue that up for me here.
Yeah.
Because I'm not sure that Tom is talking about their officers or his officers or any officers in general, right?
Yep.
So you may just want to clue me up here and be like, they also didn't seem to have a commanding officer just like Tom did, right? Like,
Yep.
so, or just like I did. This is
Yep.
third person, so just like Tom did. Yeah, so but I, just grounding me with, and it doesn't take much, it just takes like a sentence. So the reason I'm spending so much time here is there's a couple places where I'm going to point that out and be like, hey, this is another place you've changed, you've moved, everybody's moved. I got to have those 4 things again,
Yep.
or I assume they're the same as before. Does that
Yep.
make sense?
Yeah.
How does that feel?
So just on that one, presumably, if the emotional tone, for instance, is carrying through, then ignoring that one of the four, would be a perfectly valid way of proceeding, or would you read the acknowledgements of
100%.
moving?
No, 100% ignoring it. And it's one of those things of like, you can save, because you're right, dialogue being the like exchange between characters, whether it's vocal or nonverbal. And in most of your fight scenes, you're 100% right. It's going to be a lot of nonverbal. So that like exchange between characters is dialogue. Holding that back, holding that emotional resonance back, lets you stay in the exchange, right? So in the exchange between characters, we build energy for the reader. The reader feels like they're present in the scene. They're like senses are engaged. They're watching it take place. So you're 100% correct. And this is your man. I got to tell you, your fight scenes are like great. I don't think you need half of the help that you think you do. They're really good.
That's
But
good.
yeah, they're really good. In fact, there's a whole page later where I'm gonna be like, no notes. This is fantastic. But so yeah, you want to save, you want to be as strategic with that exposition, with the like descriptive sentences as you can, because you don't want to pull out of the exchanges between the characters, especially here where you kick off the scene with a exchange between the characters. You have a lot of energy coming into this scene. The last thing you want is to give me like 4 paragraphs here of Tom describing
Yeah,
the room.
that would kill the whole thing. Yeah.
Destroy it, ruin your opening. So you want to get like a sentence in here. Just give me exactly what I need. Don't give me like, we know the emotional tone. You're pulling it from, and all the way through this, we know the emotional tone, right? Like all the way through Tom's POV, I would say the emotional tone gets a little more fearful at times, but there's not big shifts where I'm like, oh, hey, you got to tell me here
Yeah.
how the emotional tone's changing. Like it's pretty steady. So I wouldn't waste time giving me descriptive sentences about that, because you're like going to pull out of the action. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. Great.
Now, when you're going to want to do that, my bet is, because the way that like high action novels tend to work, you have like see high action level stuff like you have here, and then at some point after so much of that, we're going to pull into a reflective conversation.
Hmm.
And the reflective conversation is going to be a smaller cast,
Yeah.
2 to 3 to 4 people, and they're going to be vulnerable with each other while like all the fighting's done, right? Like,
Yeah.
do you see it in all the great like war screenplays, like Saving Private Ryan? The most poignant moments are really when Tom Hanks is like sitting around with his men and they're all trying to guess what his job was before the war, right? Like it's this very charming, very vulnerable moment. And then the most vulnerable moment is when he's like with one of them and he's like, I was a teacher. I was a high school history teacher. And it's this just this beautiful, like reflective place. That's where you're going to want to lean into describing that emotional resonance,
Yeah.
because that's where it's super important. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Anything about that before we move?
No, really
Okay,
good. Really good. Thank you.
great. And again, this is a fantastic opening. Like you can see here, even though they're just talking about, even though this isn't a high action scene where we're like in a firefight, you've got really great give and take here. This is, but when we come to the end of this segment, end of like this specific moment in the scene, you do this a couple times. You don't let anybody say goodbye.
Yeah.
Is that intentional, or
I
are you
think so.
just moving to the next thing?
Fight Right, Carla Hoax, talked about her experience of combat where anything, I mean, it's only, well, not only, but, martial arts combat, but anything that isn't directly involved to what is going on right now doesn't happen. And that there's no higher processing going on was one of the
Interesting.
things that she emphasized. And I would, putting myself in Tom's thing, it's like, okay, information gain, what now? And that was the feel I wanted for it. It's not, I mean, he is very polite at other times and so forth, but right now it's like functional.
Okay.
I am, okay, so no officers and can't go around the back. What now? Sort of, it's the just everything about being a person is being turned off.
Okay. That's totally fair. And I didn't, that's great insight to these moments. When he's not in these moments, you do need to lean into the pleasantries of hello and
Yeah.
goodbye to make these stand out.
Yeah.
And I think that's really smart. I really like that. Um, you are kind of what you're, and I think it's just something you're going to sacrifice. So I don't even know that I'd worry about it. But what we get in those like transitional moments is personality.
Yeah.
How we handle those transitional moments is personality. But I think what you're pointing out is more important, that he wouldn't be doing that. So ignore this note completely. Um, yeah, this is, you insert this great reflection here, and it's perfectly timed. So I wanted to point it out to you. You've got this, like, he has this conversation with the Aussie officer. They kind of wrap the conversation. Tom looked around for inspiration. Clearly, his brilliant plan of outflanking the German gun through town wasn't all that brilliant. You're bringing this in after a full segment before you get into the next segment of dialogue, of back and forth. Really well
Your
done, man.
training.
Yeah, beautifully done. No, it's great. And why I like it is because you're not interrupting either segment, but you're telling me about the conflict and how the conflict's moving on for Tom, right? Like, you're resetting that conflict as we move into the next moment. So it's really
Right.
good. Um, so here he says Tom's eyes fell on a shape in the corner. Way to Mo. Is Mo
Moment.
jargon? Okay. I just didn't know. That was just a question for me. Um, that wasn't enough. I
Is
was
it
just
not
like,
a piece of dialogue that you'd have in your part of the world?
no, but that doesn't matter. If it's something
Yeah.
Tom would say, that's important.
Yeah.
That's what
But
matters.
very New Zealand. Wait a mo.
Yeah,
Hang on a
I
mo.
knew exactly what it meant, but I was like,
Right.
huh, I wonder if that's jargon or if well, the reason I wondered is because Way to Mo is followed by a flare.
Yeah.
So I didn't know if he just didn't get the word out. It was like,
Right.
wait, if he was trying to say wait a moment and then the flare interrupted. Yeah, but no,
Right.
it makes perfect sense. And you don't write it like it's interrupted, you write it like he said it and then the flare hits. Which was good. Uh yeah, this is great. So he moves back out with his men
Yep.
here. And again, I need,
Well, no, he's still inside at that point.
is he still inside here? Where does he
Yep.
move?
Uh,
Um Tom grabbed the
yeah,
machine gun. Is he still inside here?
yeah, he's grabbing the machine gun inside and then took his loot back to the rest of the section.
That's right.
Uh,
Okay. I'm sorry, I forgot about this moment.
yep.
So Tom tries to swing the machine gun over his shoulder and he tips his helmet over his eyes, like he struggles to carry this thing. What are you telling me about Tom here when he's doing this?
Um, the intention at the time wasn't specifically about Tom. It was just like, okay, so he's got his rifle. He's wearing a British helmets, so they flat
Yeah,
Super Bowl helmet, which are notoriously not particularly sort of stable at times. And
gotcha.
picking up a machine gun and 2 boxes of ammunition while he's carrying his rifle, and in a sort of not the most calm state. It just struck me as sort of something that, and he is a little bit of a klutz.
Yeah,
Um, he's not like completely so, but if somebody's going to trip, it'll be him.
it'll be Tom.
Sort of
Yeah.
just one of his amusing characteristics,
I
amusing to us, not for him.
Yeah, so and that's what I wanted to make sure. That's what you're doing there. You're describing exactly what you told me here. Like, this little moment you have here super humanizes Tom. Right? Like, him struggling to carry this thing, that you took time to give me two, like, big sentences about this, I thought was great, because it totally, like, makes me feel like, oh, Tom isn't this brilliant commando who's like throwing this thing over his shoulder and running out. He's just like me. He's like struggling to get this stuff out the door, right? Like, you can see him like in the same way that I'm like fumbling with my keys and my coffee mug and my backpack at the same time. Tom's like, I can't get all this stuff out of the room. I want you to enhance it a little bit by
Right?
just giving me as a chorus how the Aussies respond to him doing this. They don't have to
Yeah.
say anything. They can
Yeah.
just laugh.
Just a smirk.
Yeah, that like the Aussie soldier smirked at him. Tom's
But didn't
attempt to
offer
shrug
to
it back.
help.
Yeah, no, not well. They don't, right? Like none of them offer to help. They're just going about their day. But the interaction
Yep.
humanizes it a little bit more. Does that make
Cool.
sense?
Yep.
Yeah, and then again, don't do this. This is me like trying to get you to say goodbye in a room, but I like what you were saying.
Yep.
Here we have the transition though. Tom took the loop back to the rest of the section. Where are they? Who's there?
Yep.
Right, like
Set the
ground
stage
me.
again.
Yeah,
Yep.
ground me in it.
Yep.
And then restate the conflict, right? Like, unless the conflict is still, I've got to get around these Germans. If the conflict's still, I got to get around these Germans, you don't need to. But
It
just something
is,
like,
but I think it's still worth restating in a very short sentence. Now, how the fuck was he going to get around
yeah.
the gun? Yeah.
And even if this is the same as before he left,
I hope you
right?
don't
Like,
mind the New Zealand language.
not at all. Yeah. Tom took the loop back to the rest of the section. You know, all of his men were still standing in the same place in almost the exact same, and they all had the same expressions on their face. Oh, like done. I'm like, okay, I'm back to where we are, right? Does that make sense? Like, but just clearing that up for me. Um, the conversation between his men is great, and I see what you're saying about 9 of them is a lot, and you do want to treat them as a chorus with voices popping. You know, you kind of in this moment, you kind of have 5. You have Chick, Maury, Les, and Ken. I think those are the only 4 you give names to in this section. So
Yeah. I think there's
Bob. I have
Bob.
Bob.
Yeah.
I've got 5. So now I will say part of what's nice about these war stories, and again, I'm just jumping into a moment, but just to make sure you have it in the story is, it's the band of brothers effect. Part of what's great about following a troop like Tom's through the war is that we get moments with different, not all of them, but moments with different characters to learn a little bit more about them. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah. So just make sure that you're pulling a couple of these guys out and giving me like
Yep.
reflective moments with them where I'm
Well,
learning
that's
about their
why
journey.
it's Maury who's sort of the one who actually bothers to notice
Nice.
Tom's state and talk about it, and Chick is the one who thinks he should have Tom's job and thinks he can do anything better.
Yeah, you definitely get the feel just from this short passage, like just from the 2,000 words I read, you definitely get the feel that Chick is like kind of the, soldiery soldier who's like, I'm going to get this crap done. And I'm going to do what I'm going to be the one carrying the big gun kind of guy.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
And I'm also a bit of an ass, but
yeah, totally. So totally a bit of an ass. You totally get that from this. So your personalities are clicking really well.
Oh, good.
Here you have, this is a really nice, like Maury asks if Tom's okay. Tom says he's fine, right? Like he gives Chick the machine gun that's broken. Here you have this moment where the way you wrote it, Chick takes the machine gun, and then you tell me what he's doing. Kneeling in the doorway, he tried cycling through the boat, then set to work stripping the feed mechanism. A few minutes later, Chick slapped the feed cover shut. Nice piece of kit. Should be good to go now. This moment you want to hold until that happens in real time.
Yep.
Because what you're doing here is creating this weird time loop where you're like, hey, this is going on, but come over here to Tom and just know that this happened while this other stuff is happening. So just keep me present in the moment.
Revisit your 4 stage setting things.
We need them we need them up here when he comes in.
Okay. I was just in particular the conflict. I was thinking having Tom address that topic and so forth, bring people back to that one.
That'd be great.
It's something that logically fits, but also helps catch everybody back up again. What's coming next?
100%. And I just took it and put it down here, right? Like, so that it seems like it's happening. Like, but yeah, if you wanted to adding is great. We just need to give Tom what is he doing while everybody watches Chick do this machine.
Effectively, you've done exactly what I just said. Now that I'm reading through with a little bit,
Oh,
maybe
good.
a touch.
That's
Yeah,
nice.
yeah,
Great minds think alike. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So I like that Bob here, that Tom here restates things, right? I'm throwing Bob. He specifically says to Bob, grab the ammunition. You'll be Chick's number 2. I'm letting Bob respond, right? And I'm just having Bob respond in an affirmative
Yeah,
to what he says. And then, Les speaks. And then we have a kind of resetting of like, hey, here's where we're going, which is great.
yeah,
Les shakes his head. And then I'm just bringing it back here before they start to move. Does that make sense?
yeah,
So now, and what's nice about doing this is here you set up your kind of bookends to a segment where you're
yeah,
like, okay, this starts here with Tom coming back to his man. He gives Chick a machine gun. We're going to transition into something else in a minute. Before we transition, Chick's going to finish with the machine gun, and now we're ready to
yeah,
go. Yeah. It gives a little bit of anticipation going on, just like a micro beat.
yeah, yeah,
I got lost here because I didn't know where they are up here.
yeah, yeah,
Where is it? Where did Tom go? There he is. Because I
yeah,
didn't know where they are right here, I got lost down here.
yeah,
Does that make sense?
yeah.
I
They're all
thought that they
standing on
were,
a cross street, basically.
yeah, and I get it. As I read it, I got it.
Yeah,
And it'll be fixed if you do it up at the top. Does that make sense?
yeah,
Yeah. So you can ignore this rambling note I wrote you here. I was just like trying to figure out where I was, but I get
yeah,
it now.
yeah,
When we get to the moving across the street, it's
yeah,
great. It's really good. It's really, really good. The only thing I want is just a little more interaction from your chorus.
yeah.
Um, so right here, right, like Tom, a guy's blown up in front of Tom. Sorry, excuse me. Had to cough. A guy's blown up in front of Tom, and there's a flare that goes off, and Tom's like, right, okay, you go first and cover us from here, right? Like he's giving his instructions. He poked his head around the corner just as the officer had done. Tom could see Chick's point. To shoot along the road, he was going to have to either step into the street or try to fire the gun cack-handed. Here, he said, ducking back, passing his rifle to Aussie, toss me Schymeister. I can't say that word.
Myself.
Thank you. And then you just went straight to Tom. After a deep breath, Tom said, okay, Chick, you're first. Bob, you too. Just show me the interactions, right?
Yeah.
Like have him hand him the rifle. Maybe give me an expression. Like maybe I'll see like grits his teeth and shakes his head like, nah, I don't like it. Right. Like, but like it'll add to the depth of the scene. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Same here. He's like, okay, Chick and Bob, you'll go first. Ideally, Chick and Bob are going to respond, potentially, maybe just non-verbally. They're just going to nod, right? Like we accept what you're telling us. What I'm doing here is I'm taking this big section of instructions from Tom and I'm making it dialogue centric, where
Yeah.
they're like going back and forth a little bit more. It's keeping that reader in that moment with them.
Yeah.
I loved this. I love the countdown. On 3, 1, 2, 3, he stepped out. Submachine gun tied into his shoulder, firing a series of bursts down the street.
Yeah.
I'd build. On 3, give me a moment, right? Like of Tom's internal, right? Like Tom could feel his heart racing and his pulse beat. If he turned this corner, was he going to be blown up again, just like the last officer? 1, 2, 3.
His own gun blew him up, but
well, yeah, but you know what I mean? Like, oh, that's right. Yeah. But you know what I mean? It's that like building of the anticipation of like, this is a dangerous.
And incidentally, that gun officer being blown up by his own gun happened.
Did it really? Oh,
yeah.
That's awful. That's terrible.
They're pushing the gun loaded. Somebody knocked the trigger. End of
nice. Oh, that's awful.
Yeah. Almost everything that happens in here, aside from the named characters, is real.
Oh, wow. That's great. And that kind of historical fiction is really beautiful. Like what you're doing and bringing a historical moment to life through these characters' eyes, I think is really great.
Yeah.
It's part of what we love about historical fiction is we get to feel like we're in the moment, which is
Mm.
awesome. Um, okay, so here Tom has this moment where he's firing, he's covering his men as they cross the street, and then he ducks back utterly knackered. Fantastic. Did they make it? Chicken Bob, give him a thumbs up, right? Like, did they make it? Right? Like, or he can see Chicken Bob jump over the seawall, right?
Yeah.
Like, let me know if they made it or not. And then, like, still he pressed on. Okay, Les, right? Like, so let me know what happened. Here, you tell me Chick pokes his head out behind the seawall, but it's after Tom's taking a break.
Yeah.
By dropping it that far down, it makes us feel like he doesn't actually care.
Okay.
Yeah. I might do it this. I might just do this. I might just take this. I didn't think of this when I was editing, but I might just take this.
Yeah.
Um, actually, I would probably take this whole piece here. That whole he was panting when he ducked behind, utterly knackered, because we want that utterly knackered, and still he pressed on
Yeah.
next to each other. So I might just drop it
One paragraph. Yeah.
one paragraph down so that I get Chick and Bob there, and then
Yeah.
I can have him pull back. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah. But you'll have to decide in the timing of that, because I know that screws up the timing a little bit, because Chick
Oh,
and
yeah.
Bob,
Needs a.
yeah. But
Yes. No, I can see what you're trying to do. That makes sense, and it's easy to make.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's the same call and response,
Yeah.
action, response from the characters, Tom, response from the characters, to
Yeah.
give that feeling of back and forth. Um, I loved this bit. This was great. I love that you're giving me what it sounds like, the thunk, 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 that you're giving me the like rounds rush past. This is all excellent. And it's really, this is what I'm talking about, the like great battle scene writing you're doing. Part of what I like that you're doing is when these kind of scenes are written really well, the battle itself almost becomes its own character, so the surroundings that Tom is interacting with, like this thunk thunk thud here, is like the environment speaking to him. And I really like how you did this. It's very well done. The only thing I might add, Tom finally gets across that seawall. I might give him an internal relief as well.
Yep.
Of like, I made it. Does that make sense? And Les has fallen, maybe some guilt around leaving him behind. I don't know how deep you want to go here with that, but I mean, Maury and Bill bring him
Yeah.
right up, so it's not like he's like dying back there, but
Yeah.
something that like gives us like, this is how Tom feels when he lands in the sand.
I think the answer there is surprise.
Yeah, and that might be it. Like, I mean, that's a great, like, shit. Tom jumped, clearing Les, tumbling over the seawall into the sand, right? Like, and I might even have him like patting himself down. He checked for bullet holes. He couldn't believe he actually made it, right? Like something of that
Yeah.
nature of like how he's feeling about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you feel about all of that?
Great. In fact, just when you said that, yeah, just reminded me. I came off a motorbike with a passenger at one point, and in the dark.
Oh, that's terrifying.
It wasn't actually. I was going around a corner and thought, oh, suddenly this is much sharper than I thought. Rear wheel hit some shingle, and I
Oh,
thought, that isn't good.
yeah.
Flying through literally nothing between that moment, and I was flying through the air thinking, I hope there's not a fence nearby, because New Zealand has wire fences,
Yeah.
wire fences. And then the next thing, I was lying on the ground and thinking, well, how badly am I hit? And it was only after that that I got to thinking about, I better think about my passenger.
Wow. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
But it
And
was
that's,
literally just those two thoughts. And so, yeah, trying to
yeah.
bring that sort of feeling of ceasing, or gaps in time sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And that I love how you're transferring that moment of like shock and like kind of personal revelation that then leads to empathy, where in a non-action type moment you might go straight to empathy. You might be like, oh my gosh, are you okay? But instead, because there's this high adrenaline moment, you're like, wait, am I dead? Like, what just happened? It's that, and I like that you're transferring that experience into this moment. I think it's going to make this feel really real. Like, It does already. I think it's going to enhance the kind of feeling around it. Does that make sense?
Yep.
This is another place. Tom kills this German.
Yep.
I don't know. I might have him like think about what just, I don't know though, because you are, like you said earlier, you are in the middle of battle and they are just kind of moving through. A lot of times internal emotions don't hit people till after it's all over. So I might leave that out here, but it felt like this might be a place for some internal dialogue, but I don't know. I don't know if it is or
Yeah.
not.
No, I think that there is, it's not like deep introspection or something. It's just
No.
an acknowledgement of what just, like a non-emotional acknowledgement, similar to his flashing thought of, shit, I'm going to have nightmares about this up above.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Just
Just
something.
that acknowledgement of what's happening.
Yep.
Yeah, and I don't know. But again, I don't know because the problem, like we were saying earlier, is every like line of internal dialogue / description that you add slows down the action a touch. And so you
Yep.
want to keep us present in the moment.
Yep. But I think it's the gun clicked empty is the point to
Yeah.
and again have the gun clicked
Yeah.
empty is the more important event that's just happened.
Totally.
And that I think communicates his internal state. He's just
100%.
shot somebody, but what he's thinking about is his gun clicked empty.
Yeah, I don't have any more bullets. Yeah.
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 Not at this point in time at all worried about what he's done, sort of
Yeah.
thing.
No, I think that's great. That's a great catch. It's really good. Um, Yeah, so this is the place, man, where I get into reading you here. I've got no notes. It's really great. The back and forth is fantastic. Like, I don't think there's any way I can make this any better. Um, your voices are solid. You're getting everybody participating here. It's really great writing. Um, again, here we've stationed into this position on the other side of the seawall. We're in a
Yep.
different location. I would take a minute, like just a sentence in here somewhere to reassess. Everybody made it. Like all 9 of us are here. And like, this is kind of what I'm seeing as Tom.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Just give
And
me that who and where.
what's the
You don't,
next? A
yeah,
moment for him to stop and plan, perhaps.
maybe. I don't know though. I like the rushiness of it. The
Well,
like,
not
let's
not a big
go.
plan, but just because it started with him with the conflict
Yeah.
again. What
Yeah.
what the hell am I doing now? Sort of thing. At which point you've got a reason to reevaluate
Yeah.
what's going on around it, and then yeah,
And you do have that happening down here. He does take this moment to like reorient everybody. But I see what
yeah,
you're saying
to
up
make it a
here.
little more, yeah,
His internal, like, okay,
yeah,
what in the hell do we do now? Like, okay, we got across the road. Now what do we do? I do love the line later where one of them is like, "Hey, maybe we can stop running back and forth across the road." Like, that was a really funny moment. Um, but yeah, I like that. Yeah. So you don't need an emotional tie here though, because we're in the same
yeah,
emotional zone.
but just yeah, what's on
Yeah.
stage at the moment, yeah,
Yeah. And this is another one of those places where he's like giving instructions
yeah,
to people. Give me their nonverbal responses so that I know that I'll feel everybody's on the same page, which will make me as the reader feel like I'm here too. Does that make
yeah,
sense? Like,
right. That's a good
yeah,
point.
it gives me the like, thing that we're doing. You leave the other guys out of here. He gives specific instructions to some people and not to everybody else. I don't
Yeah.
know if that's important or not. It was just something I noticed.
No, that's a good point. Yeah,
Yeah. You might just have him turn to everybody and be like, everybody else just hold tight, right? Like something of that. And then they can all like kind of like take a deep breath and like, yeah, we'll just hold tight. So there's an interesting thing here where Tom has this revelation. They're being
yeah,
shot at from a different direction and they shoot back. And Tom's like, hold fire, hold fire. Tom slapped Chick's shoulder to emphasize the command. It's a burn gun, hold fire. So
Yeah.
we need to feel his revelation before he starts yelling,
Yep.
because
And
we're
it's
in his
going to be
POV.
easy now that you mention it, because one of the things that as sort of fan service for the history buffs and so forth, along with the thunk, thunk, thunk of the big
Yeah.
20mm, the sounds of the different machine guns
Oh,
is
perfect.
something that the various characters notice and at various times use to identify to a degree what's going on. So having the sound of the German machine gun that Chick's using and the machine gun firing back being the slower, more methodical sound of a British machine gun.
Yeah.
It's like, hang on, these are going the wrong way round.
Yeah. And that's great. I love that, because it doesn't just create the moment for us with Tom, it also brings authenticity to the story in a very deep way. It's kind of your way of telling everybody, like, hey, I've done my research. I'm not just making this crap up. Like, that's great. So but bringing us into that, I think is going to create a nice moment here with us and Tom. It makes him seem competent. It's a really nice parallel, like perpendicular to him stumbling and not being able to carry everything in the beginning of this. Now that we're in the action, he's like picking out machine gun sounds. Like it's a great yeah, the modulation's really strong in his character, which is awesome. So Ken appears here all of a sudden. That's why I need the other guys up here. I need you to tell me where Ken is. Because all of a sudden he's like, Tom's like, trade places with me, Ken. I'm like, well, Ken, where did Ken come from? Yeah. But this is all great. But you don't tell me. Ken nods, but then you make the assumption that they trade places.
Right.
So go ahead and tell me, like, Ken nodded, scooching past Tom, right? Like, well, I'm sorry, Ken puts his helmet up and they get shot at, but then you don't tell me what happened to Ken. He just disappears. So wrap up the Ken, right? Like, get Ken out of the
Open
scene.
Ken, close Ken.
Yeah, move Ken on.
Yeah.
Here's a place where I started using dialogue spacing. You had this all in one paragraph.
Right.
I'm separating out Chick's nod.
Yeah, because
as
it's a response.
Yeah, it's his response. Technically, grammatically, how you wrote it is correct.
That's irrelevant. Yeah.
Yeah, I tend to break that because it gives me more of a feel of that like dialogue. But totally up to you. And then again here, like when he gives this order, how do the men respond? Give me and treat them like a chorus. All the men nodded in agreement, right? Like,
yeah, there's better a spokesperson. Yeah.
Yeah, either that or a spokesperson. But I think leaning into your chorus here and just having them all is totally fine. And part of what's nice about using a chorus in this kind of battle scene way is it really does emphasize Tom as the leader.
Yeah.
When you say all the men, it emphasizes like everybody's behind Tom. Like it's a good, does that make sense?
Excellent point. Yeah.
This is great. Like the whole thing of them crossing the street again is really good. Tom like cueing him is great. And the ending here is I didn't have any more notes for you on Tom. I think you wrap it. And I love that you end his POV in high action. That's fantastic. Because you end it with me still wanting more Tom.
Right.
And you jump to the next POV, which is like, oh, I got to get through this because I got to get back to Tom. Like I got to see what happened with Tom. So I like how you're pulling it out here.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else you want to talk about with this first section?
No, it's really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, the writing's beautiful, man. You should be really proud of this. Okay, let's go to Gerhard. Again, I want from Gerhard who, when, where.
Yep.
Right. I don't know that I said emotions. I don't know that you need emotions because it's the same, but I want that like establishment. We've changed perspectives. Where are they?
Yep.
Is Gerhard shooting at Ken here?
The two aren't linearly connected up to this point.
Okay. I wasn't sure.
But at this point, they start being linearly connected, that somebody's just thrown a grenade into Stovos's position, who we've come across before, one of Gerhardt's
Okay.
comrades. So at that point, you're probably going to go, well, that was probably Tom, wasn't it?
I assumed that this was Tom, and I
Yeah,
assume that this is Tom's men he's shooting at.
yeah. Now at this point, it is. Yeah, up until
Okay,
this point, they've
perfect.
been separated, and this is where they start crossing and catching up with each other.
I love it. I love that you had Tom throw the grenade, and then you have the other side showing the aftermath of the grenade. That's really great. Really well
Right.
done. Gerhardt's POV is good. What I like about what you're doing here, just to encourage you to like do more of it. Gerhardt has a bit different voice than Tom. He's a little more observant. You can kind of see in his paragraphs that he's seeing more than Tom saw. Gerhardt also seems a little colder, which I think, just than Tom did. Tom had a lot of anxiety and fear. Gerhardt seems a little more stoic. Now, again, I'm just reading a small part, but am I
Yeah.
hitting that right?
Yeah. Gerhardt sort of he's been there before, Poland, France. He's a
Yeah.
professional.
Yeah, that's
Um,
how it feels. Professional
this
is a
isn't
great
his
word.
first battle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so all through, he's the most professional of all of the people in any combat scenes.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, yeah, Tom is still sort of anxious, figuring it out. Kreutzmann, the big bad, is just constantly angry that it's not going his way all the time.
Gotcha.
Um, and
Well,
yeah,
the way you're altering Gerhardt's cadence, like the structure of the sentences, and the way you're altering like the pacing, where he's got more kind of observances and more like it gives it a that more professional feel. You're doing a really good job with it. Tom feels a little more emotional, a little more scattered, a little more like, okay, I guess I'm running across the street again. Like, I'm fumbling with I could not picture Gerhard knocking his hat off as he picked up a machine gun. You've written him in a way that's not who this guy is. And I think that's really
right,
good. Yeah. Um, I do need to know who Gerhard's with. Again,
right.
like I'm kind of in a black fog here. I don't know who he's with.
Okay, yeah. He's with
Yeah.
Jochen, his loader, and um, either Franz. I think Franz appears during this scene, I think, doesn't he?
Yeah. Is it just the two of them at first? Just Gerhard and Jochen?
Yeah,
I just specify that in here somewhere. Just give me
yeah,
a step that like the two of them set alone
yeah,
with the gun. Yeah. And that'll settle it for me. And then
yeah,
if you do that, I don't need to know who says this because I know it's Jochen because it's not Gerhard. Does that make sense?
yeah,
Um, if it's just two of them. But I was like,
yeah.
wait, are there 9 guys here too? And so
Right.
yeah.
Yeah,
Um yeah, yeah, that's me trying to figure out who's there.
yeah,
Um Yeah, so ideally, you have this big thing that happens. When nothing moved, he fired again, keeping them pinned against the wall, huddled in a doorway, where wherever they were hiding. And another short burst, and a delay, and then another, measuring out his bullets like a miser's pennies. Beautiful, like professional work from like laying out this character different than the kind of like Tom turning the corner just spraying bullets in all directions. It's great. But here's the place where I need a little bit more. Far down the road, movement caught his eye. By the light of a flare, a British truck hurled around the corner, gears grunting, engine revving. It accelerated straight down the road. Gun flashes from multiple machine guns. Soldiers hung off of every surface, firing as they raced closer. Distance was hard to estimate. So he goes right into like analyzing what's going on. I need him and Yakin to say something. This is such a big thing.
yeah.
They both have to comment on this.
Right.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
it doesn't have to be like a big, it can literally just be like, what the fuck? Right. Like that's all it needs to be is like a emotional expression of like, what is happening here? Right.
feels
Like,
like it needs a 1, 2, 3 sort of A, B, A
yeah,
for me.
potentially. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Like you could have Yakin be like, what is that? And Gerhard be like, does something we have to shoot. and y'all can be like, all right then, right? Like that's really what you need, is that like back and forth between the three of them that conveys their like, what in the hell is going on? The reason I want it though is because it'll emphasize that this is crazy.
Yeah, and in fact, the word "crazy" was the word that came up that has to be in that back and forth.
Yeah, absolutely.
What are those nutcases doing now?
Yeah, what is this crazy crap, right? Like, or this crazy shit. Like it's something that like indicates like, oh, this isn't. And I wouldn't take them out of their professional mindset, but I would have them comment on like, oh, this is different than these idiots across the seawall that I'm shooting at. Like now they have a bus, yeah, like something of that. Yeah,
Yeah. I also want, now that you mention it, to make it clear that this isn't smart tactics or something. This
yeah,
is just what the fuck.
yeah, totally. Yep. And your
Yeah.
description reads that way, but then he doesn't respond to it. So I was reading, I was like, oh, is this something they do? Like, is this
Yeah.
something that he's like, all right, yeah. Anyway, I think that, yeah, again, it's a great piece, man. Is there anything else you want to talk about?
No, it's been
Okay.
really, really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, again, you're doing so much right. Um, I know a lot of times when I'm writing something, if it's going well and I try to start fixing it, I actually get in my own way. So I do want you to like keep what you're doing right. It's really good. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would read this whole book. This is fantastic. Um, yeah, it's a good work. All right, I'm gonna hit stop and we can talk a little bit more off the recording.